Well, grace and peace from our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to all of you in the Anglican Church in North America. My name is Father Andrew Rowell. I'm the Vice Chair of the Governance Task Force of the ACNA, and it is my honor and privilege on behalf of the GTF, and with thanks to Father Chris Culpepper, the current chair of the GTF, for the privilege of being able to present to you 5 proposed amendments to the canons of the ACNA that the GTF now submits to you as members of the province for comment. This first comment period will last for 3 weeks. It begins today, March 1st, and it will last until March the 21st. And so if you will send emails to governance@anglicanchurch.net, we'll be able to go through your comments, make revisions as appropriate. And just so you know, there'll be a second comment period from April the 8th to the 26th. And that draft will go to Diocesan Chancellors, to members of the Anglican Legal Society, and delegates to Provincial Council that are known at that time. And then we'll also do another set of revisions as appropriate based on those comments and suggestions. And then finally, we'll do a final report before Provincial Council in 2024. And I know you're not used to seeing me. You're used to seeing the much more handsome and rugged face of Canon Phil Ashe. But I pray that God would bless our time together on this video for the sake of good and godly governance in the ACNA. Just one more reminder before we get into the substance of the changes that we encourage you to really engage in this process. We don't do wordsmithing from the floor at Provincial Council. Council delegates vote them either up or down. If they're voted down, they'll go into subsequent work for the GTF. And so these comments are very important to us as we seek to hear from everyone so that what affects all is decided by all. So we encourage you to engage in this process earnestly. So without further ado, let's discuss the 5 proposed amendments to the canons of the ACNA. The first canonical change that the GTF unanimously recommends is the addition of new paragraphs 8 and 9 to Title I, Canon 5 of our canons regarding dioceses. So Section 8 will read as follows concerning safeguarding policies. Each diocese shall adopt safeguarding policies both for children and for adults to be implemented within their congregations, ministries, and diocesan structures. Such policies shall be adopted no later than June 30th of 2025. Now, the rationale for that paragraph 8 should be self-evident. Every diocese needs robust safeguarding policies to prevent the abuse of both children and adults. Most, if not all, of our dioceses have such plans with regard to protecting children, but we believe that protection plans for adults are less common. We have a model plan for children abuse prevention for the diocese that the province has made available to dioceses to consider, and a model plan for the protection of the abuse of adults is currently under consideration and discussion. But this amendment gives our diocese sufficient time to comply with what is now a canonical requirement that every diocese have such plans in place. Moving on to the new Section 9, this is the lengthiest amendment, and so I may not read it in full, but I know it's going to be up on a screen in front of you now. So the new Section 9 is as follows concerning reports of misconduct. Each diocese shall establish processes and mechanisms to respond to reports of misconduct by clergy and laypersons, to facilitate care of those affected, and to adjudicate presentments of presbyters and deacons, and where appropriate, impose sentence pursuant to Title IV. In developing such processes and mechanisms, each diocese shall adopt the following minimum standards by canon, beginning on or before December 31st, 2025. So let me pause there and just say that we are giving dioceses a fair amount of time until December 31st of 2025 to appoint or elect some new functional bodies within their diocese. And all of these are so that the substantial revisions to our disciplinary canons that are currently under consideration by the GTF, that the diocese will be ready for those changes when they come, as you'll see as this unfolds. So subparagraph 1 of section 9 says that each diocese shall appoint one or more diocesan reports receivers to receive reports of misconduct, and that in no event shall any chancellor of the diocese serve a diocesan reports receiver. Subparagraph 2 describes what that new diocesan reports receiver is to do. Upon receipt of a report of misconduct involving a presbyter or deacon, the diocesan reports receiver or receivers shall evaluate each report in a timely manner and shall recommend to the bishop whether the report discloses reasonable grounds to believe an offense under Title IV has been committed. With the advice of the standing committee or its designated subcommittee, the bishop shall determine whether a report of misconduct involving a presbyter or deacon should be dismissed, or if such report should proceed to investigation under subsection 6 below. So the rationale for these first few paragraphs of subparagraphs of paragraph 9 are because over the last year, the GTF and its various subcommittees had devoted over 1,500 hours to clarifying how reports of misconduct are to be received, evaluated, investigated, adjudicated, and resolved. And so these new amendments to Title I reflect a portion of that work, and we're seeking to aid our diocese in their efforts to handle reports of misconduct in a clear and transparent and equitable manner. And so this first piece of that new world of discipline is that each diocese has this reports receiver. And that person is going to be an intake officer, kind of in an HR sort of position. And they're going to be that on-ramp for a report of misconduct. And that person is to evaluate a report about whether or not it presents reasonable grounds to think that misconduct has indeed occurred. And they don't do that in a vacuum. They're working with the bishop, and there are more eyes on it. It's a lot of air and light in the room trying to consider the validity of a report. And if that report is deemed to present reasonable grounds, like if this was true, then there is indeed an offense that may have occurred, then it goes on to an investigative committee. So we'll move on to subparagraph 3, which says that each diocese shall facilitate provision of pastoral care for those making reports deemed to disclose reasonable grounds under subsection 2, as well as for the clergy who are the subject of such reports. This subparagraph is in response to a year-long comment period that we've received from the province that says that a key need in our diocese is that pastoral care would be provided and that it wouldn't have to come only from the bishop, who wears so many hats in the process of a disciplinary procedure. And so a diocese is going to need to oversee the provision of pastoral care, and not just for every claim, not every report that comes in, but only those deemed to present reasonable grounds and thus proceeding to investigation. Subparagraph 4 says that upon receipt of a report of misconduct involving a layperson, the reports receiver shall inform the bishop, and then the diocesan reports receiver goes on to work with the bishop to inform a warden in the parish where either the layperson is a member or where the alleged misconduct took place, as well as the member of the clergy in charge of that congregation. Now, all of that is to provide that if there is a layperson who has done something in a parish, and someone who has knowledge of that alleged misconduct isn't comfortable reporting that to the rector or the priest in charge, this is just another avenue for them to make a report at the diocesan level. And all that the reports receiver does in that case is make sure that the bishop is informed of it, and then working with the bishop, they'll either go back to the rector or the priest in charge and or a warden and say, hey, there's things that are going on in your parish, and it needs to be dealt with at the congregational level. But our desire is that it's not something that goes in a drawer or there's silence regarding. But again, there's more transparency. There's more light and air in the room as we try to address reports of misconduct and deal with them in a fair and equitable and transparent way. Subparagraph 5 says that if there's a report made at the diocesan level of misconduct by a bishop, then that immediately goes into a provincial process under Title IV. And so if that report comes in, then the province is immediately brought in, because the discipline of bishop doesn't happen at the diocesan level, but rather at the provincial level. Moving on to subparagraph 6, we begin to see when a report comes in deemed to be based on reasonable grounds, it goes on to this newly created Reports Investigation Committee. So let me read subparagraph 6. Each diocese shall have a diocesan Reports Investigation Committee to investigate all reports of misconduct by a presbyter or deacon referred to it under this canon. Such diocesan Reports Investigation Committee shall include at least one legally qualified person, and then there's a definition given to what that means. And so that committee, which serves to replace what the canonical investigator does under the current Title IV, our hope is that committee would be a stable body that would exist at the diocesan level, and any reasonable report comes to that committee, and then they would handle the investigation of that report. And over time, they would gain expertise, and they would learn from failures, they would learn from successes, and over time, as an elected independent body, they would, within the diocese, really develop some expertise and some excellence in conducting those investigations. They're not an ad hoc committee that's called and then disbanded, but rather they would indeed be a stable body. Under the revisions to the disciplinary canons, they'll be given powers in order to affect those investigations, and we believe that they'll be the ones that draft a presentment if indeed a presentable offense is deemed to have occurred. And then at the diocesan level, then it would be referred back to the bishop for further action as appropriate. Subparagraph 7 makes it clear that nothing in the canon may be interpreted to limit the appointment of diocesan reports receivers and investigation committees to serve more than one diocese, nor may anything in this canon be interpreted to limit the sharing of pastoral care resources among dioceses. It is our hope that each diocese will figure out how to do this in the best way for their diocese. And for instance, Fort Worth is providing intake officers and investigation committees for many of the dioceses out west. And so we're making it clear that as each diocese figures out how to do this well, in the interest of subsidiarity, we want them to have the freedom to work together in order to do so in a way that is reasonable and again tries to provide fair, just, equitable, and transparent processes for discipline at the diocesan level. So the second, that's the first suggested amendment to our canons. The second canonical change that we unanimously recommend is an amendment to paragraph 1 of Title III, Canon 8, Section 4, concerning the election of a bishop. So as you'll see in the current subparagraph 1, there's this sentence that the College of Bishops shall consider the report of the Executive Committee on the sustainability of the electing diocese under Canon 1.5.7 prior to its decision whether to grant consent to the diocese to commence the process of the election of a bishop. Now that sentence was added by Provincial Council 2020. And the desire was that when the College of Bishops is about to consent to the election of a bishop by a diocese, they first might say, well, what did the executive committee say about the viability of this diocese and whether or not it is sustainable? But then the next year in Provincial Council 2021, that language in Canon 1.5.7 was amended to say that the executive committee shouldn't be asking, is a diocese sustainable, but rather should do all they could to strengthen a diocese that is perceived to be struggling. And so when Provincial Council 2021 eliminated that sustainability determination, it essentially made the change made by Provincial Council 2020 about adding in this sentence about sustainability moot. And so Provincial Council 2021 implicitly undid the amendment made by Provincial Council 2020, which, again, to be clear, is completely appropriate. I mean, every provincial council can change a prior provincial council's decisions, and then all of those changes are, of course, ratified every few years, every 5 years or so, when assembly gathers to ratify changes made by councils in the intervening years between the last assembly. So this proposed change simply asks Provincial Council 2024 to acknowledge the amendment made in 2020 became moot because of the change made in Provincial Council 2021. So moving on to the third of our 5 unanimous recommendations is a canonical change, amending paragraph 1 of Title 1, Canon 1, Section 5, concerning the officers of the church. And in this paragraph that describes the various offices within the province, it contains this sentence: the Archbishop may appoint a Provincial Dean in consultation with the College of Bishops to serve at the pleasure of the Archbishop until his successor is appointed, and who may be authorized by the Archbishop to represent him in his absence. Under our disciplinary canons, the Provincial Dean serves a number of key roles if charges of misconduct are brought against a sitting archbishop. And because that Provincial Dean serves key functions in any potential discipline of an archbishop, it is our amendment and our suggestion that we say that the archbishop must appoint a dean of the province, a provincial dean. And so this simply is the change from the word may to the word shall, because we need the appointment of a provincial dean to be mandatory and not optional in order for the disciplinary canons to work appropriately if indeed they become triggered. The fourth canonical change that we recommend is an amendment to paragraph 4 of Title 4, Canon 3, Section 1, concerning accusations. I'll read this one in full. Whenever the bishop believes he cannot fairly assess the credibility of the accuser or accusers, the accusation or accusations, or the accused, or fairly impose sentence, he shall recuse himself and delegate the investigation, presentment, and or sentencing to another bishop having jurisdiction. So our suggestion, our amendment, is to add the following clause at the end of that subparagraph, or that paragraph 4 rather, or to a bishop formerly having had jurisdiction who is still an active member of the College of Bishops. And the suggestion here is that when a bishop feels in an extraordinary circumstance that he needs to recuse himself from a disciplinary process within his diocese, he can currently only recuse himself and turn over the process to another diocesan bishop. And so the suggestion is that, a former diocesan bishop, a bishop that had jurisdiction, who is still an active member of the college, would also be an appropriate person to whom to turn over an investigation. They were formerly an ordinary, they had experience of being an ordinary, and so this would increase the bench of those who might be able to step in the extraordinary circumstance of the recusal of a diocesan bishop in the process of a disciplinary process. The fifth canonical and last canonical change that we recommend is an amendment to paragraph 2 of Title 4, Canon 5, Section 4, concerning the provincial tribunal. And so the provincial tribunal shall consist of 7 members who shall be elected by the Provincial Council. And all that amendment is correcting an error in how the current canons describe how Provincial Council puts members on the province as highest court. It is election, and it is not appointment. And so this language is just being amended to make it clear that it's always been an election, and that is the way that someone is put on the province's highest court, the provincial tribunal. It is indeed election. And then at the end of this paragraph 2, we've struck the words, "In the event of any vacancies, the Archbishop shall fill those vacancies in consultation with the Executive Committee until the Provincial Council meets to elect members of the court or alternates." So that language has been struck in favor of new language. "An equal number of alternate members of this tribunal shall be elected in the same manner, and such alternates shall serve in the event of any vacancies on the tribunal or the recusal of a member of the tribunal." So that amendment provides that 7 alternates will be available in the event of any vacancy or any recusal, rather than leaving the power to appoint replacement members to the Archbishop, which could produce conflicts of interest in certain circumstances. So those are the 5 changes that we unanimously commend for your consideration. Obviously, the last 4 are quite concise, whereas the first one is lengthy. We encourage you to consider it prayerfully, and also know that there is hard work going on in the GTF to provide a robust revision of the disciplinary canons in the near future, and those changes get the diocese ready for those changes when they indeed are presented to the province for comment and consideration, and later vote by a council and an assembly's ratification. We pray God's grace and mercy on you as you read through these and prayerfully consider your comments. And we earnestly ask your prayers for the Governance Task Force as we seek good and godly governance in our province for the sake of the glory of God and the expanse of his kingdom. And so we look forward to hearing your comments. Again, you can send them beginning today, March 1st, until March 21st by email to governance@anglicanchurch.net. God bless you. Thank you so much.